Good morning, everybody. It's Will and Jake from the Coffee Squad podcast. How you doing this morning, Jake?
Good, bud. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Man, look at you. You got your hair all slicked and
Oh yeah,
you got a fancy little background now. I mean, you came prepared today, bud.
yeah. I gotta step the game up, right? Actually, my hair is just so long, I have to put a whole bunch of crap in it to keep it down. I'll get a haircut tomorrow, so I'll be happy.
Sure.
All right. Well, welcome to episode 60 of the Coffee Squad podcast. Today, we are discussing the importance of conducting a physical security assessment, specifically having a third party come in and do it. But before we get started today, let's see what Jake is drinking this morning, what kind of water and ketosis type tea he's drinking.
Man, that's the first time you said that right. Ketosis, bud. So I've completely fallen off the keto wagon. I shouldn't say completely. Like, I'm pretty good in the morning, I'm pretty good in the afternoon, and then the evening hits. So one thing that I've learned and done, and I think I've mentioned this a few times on the show, is a good family friend. I mean, shoot, we grew up together as little kids. So we're real young. Her name's Angela Smith. She got me drinking, it's called ketones by a company called Prove It. So that's what I drink. And I think it just kind of helps you stay in a moderate, low-end form of keto when you're not on a super strict ketosis diet. With all the traveling and everything I've been doing, I've realized I'm a stress eater. I didn't say I shouldn't.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I realized I've known that for a long time, and now I'm really just proving that to myself. So kind of going along with a physical security assessment, just finished writing a nice 67-page long assessment for a client. So traveling a lot, traveling for some family stuff out on the West Coast. So I think my stress level has been through the roof, and I've completely started like, hey, a little cookie here or there is not going to hurt. A little of this isn't going to hurt. Next thing you know, I completely off the wagon. So yeah,
Oh yeah,
I'm drinking a Mai Tai Prove It ketone drink. Delicious.
Does that have the rum added into it? It's still a little early, right?
Hey, it is early, but you know what?
Say you can't start day drinking if you don't start in the morning.
Yeah, I think that's what alcoholics say, Will. I'm glad you said that. But
you know what they used to say in my unit? Alcoholics admit they have a problem. We're just drunks.
There you go. Right. And then again, I have my Hawaiian shaved ice, Alani Nu. I don't want to hear any garbage about this. I know you kind of busted my balls on social media because I told you it tastes like Hawaii. But have one sip of this and tell me it doesn't taste like Hawaii. And I challenge our listeners and our viewers out there. You know, those of us who've been to Hawaii know what Hawaii tastes like. This is Hawaii in a can. So, yeah, there we go. Will, go ahead and wow all your coffee snob connoisseurs out there with your brilliance.
Well, I would imagine that Hawaii tastes like salty coconut and suntan lotion or baby oil or something like that. But anyways,
pure deliciousness right there. Pure deliciousness, I tell you.
I'm drinking a sparkling water, grapefruit. It's kind of my favorite go-to. It's, just enough flavor, but not too much. And then I'm drinking JB's Buckshot by OneNation Coffee. It's a medium dark roast. It's the one that Phil had recommended and actually had some when we were on the other week. And it's just a really good, mellow, dark roast, robust flavor.
Yeah.
It's just all around good one.
I got a story for you. Definitely not a coffee drinker. A buddy of mine, Bert, retired dentist. He can definitely attest to this. My wife used to drink coffee. Her family drinks it. So when they used to come visit, we got a French press. Yeah, I almost said French roast. French press, thingamabobber, right? And that's what we say in the kitchen. Traveling back from San Antonio, I was still in the military at the time, so we're going through everything. And Bert and his wife came to stay at the house, and here I'm up clanking around the kitchen in the morning, looking for the coffee pod and Keurig or anything, right? And I'm like, oh man, we got this French press here. Let me make you some coffee. So of course I don't read the instructions because what man reads instructions first of all? Make them some oil slick coffee. So it was the joke for the longest time. Well, this past weekend we had someone stay at our house, knew that they were a coffee drinker. And I go to the store. I'm at Harris Teeter. I don't see how people know what coffee to buy. There's like a million different coffees. Yeah. There's a light roast, there's a roast, there's a heavy roast, there's a dark roast, there's this roast, there's that roast, whole bean, partial bean. I don't know. So I'm trying to like call like, hey, what do you guys drink? Trying to be a good host. Of course, they don't get back. I'm like, well, screw it. So I go with a medium roast. But what is the difference between a light roast, as far as flavor and taste goes, between a light roast, a medium roast, and a dark roast?
Well, Phil would probably be the better one to ask this, but from what I can tell is a lighter roast is going to be a little more acidic and it's going to be more of a fruity floral tones to it. Whereas medium and dark roast, the more you go, is a little more smoother, robust, and usually the nuttier and like chocolatey caramel flavors start coming out.
Oh,
it's just about how long you roast it. The more you roast it, the darker it gets, less, it burns off a little bit of the oils and stuff like that. So it's not as acidic. So, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I look like I need to get in the sun, man. I'm looking super white today. I don't know what's going on. My lighting or something.
You look pasty, bud.
I do.
I'm not going to lie. Like, yeah, maybe that's your white privilege just shining through.
Yeah.
But hey, let's skip past that and then move on.
All right. So, all right. Boom. Why is a physical security assessment important? I mean, what is so important about conducting these things?
So really, I would say at its core, like a physical security assessment is about keeping your facilities, your people, and your assets safe from real world threats. And that includes like a physical deterrence, detection of intruders, and responding to those threats. So I really simplified all of that, but it's really protecting what you care about. And you're looking at it. I want to speak for how we do it at Freedom Consulting, right? We look at it from an outside in and an inside out approach. And so when we do a physical security assessment, it's not just a person showing up. We actually use a team. We have intel analysts looking at the threat and the crime data. We're not just looking at threats and crimes. We're also looking at natural disasters. We're looking at flood zones. If you let's say Texas. I think Texas is a great example, right? They kind of had that 100-year winter freeze storm. And so we look at all the threats that are out there, not just man-made or from bad actors. We're looking at natural as well. And then taking all those, compiling them into a report that our client can read and understand.
Okay. So essentially it's just protecting what you consider your assets, your most valuable assets, finding out what they are and finding out everything and putting in a report for them.
Yeah, I mean that's
like real KISS method right there, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's super simplified. Again, I think it's I kind of want to go on the basic way, but to actually do one, it's super in depth. I mean, like I said, I think mine just finished with 60 some odd pages, and I'm not saying because it's super long, it's great. It's just there's the detail in there. And look, one thing I kind of want to mention with doing a physical security assessment, and we've talked about on the show, is convergence. Usually, and I'll kind of talk about this a little bit later, but we talk. I would say the flavor, right? When people talk security, securities and industries, they either go one or two. Cybersecurity always comes up, and then when you look at physical security, they're talking the technology, the hardware out there, and then security guards and alarms and all that stuff. So, and so for us, we look at both. And one thing I think that we always look at is here at Freedom is and I've mentioned this before in other podcasts, but if you look at a circle and a continuation of a circle, you look at physical, you look at human, and you look at technical. And for us, a security assessment, a physical security assessment touches on all three of those. We don't necessarily jump into the cyber side, but we definitely evaluate the technical side. And so a point that I always kind of talk with most of our clients is both cyber and physical security are equally important. The physical security industry is roughly a $30 billion industry, which $30 billion is quite large. And one point I always make is, look, all the firewalls in the world, cannot stop or help you if an attacker removes your storage media from your storage room.
Yep.
That's a physical threat. Same with your wires and everything that runs into and out of the building. That's physical. So again, there's that convergence. So
well, I think with just how fast technology has evolved and it's everywhere now, that when people think of security, they automatically kind of go to that cybersecurity mind frame. But like you said, the convergence of physical and cybersecurity now is just so important but you do have to have both.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, cameras, everyone wants to say cameras. And don't get confused. I am definitely a proponent of cameras, but the right cameras. I can't tell you how many times talking to clients, it's I call it camera overkill and the over reliance on cameras. Security guards, they might have these phenomenal PTZ pan tilt zoom cameras out there throughout their property, spend a ton of money on them, but they don't set them up properly. Or they say, oh, our security guards are monitoring them 24/7. Big flash alert out there, BS. No, they're not. Yeah. There's been numerous studies that the average person watches a security camera for about somewhere between 7 and 8 minutes, and then their attention goes somewhere else. So setting up those cameras, again, properly, putting them on motion activated. So, when it is motion activated, it sends an alert. So that security guard then looks at the camera and says, okay, now, for every cause, there's a reaction, right? So alarm goes off and now there's a reaction. What are the guards going to do? And it's more than just that. Also, we're looking at policies, procedures, and how those interact. And are the employees doing what they're supposed to do? Do they know what they're supposed to do? Are the security guards doing what they do? Again, so a physical security assessment is a major, major overhaul. Or undertaking. Shouldn't say overhaul. Undertaking is a much better word for that.
And I think you brought up a good point, is no matter how good your technical security is, if the human part of it is failing, then it's going to fail.
Yeah. Humans, technology really doesn't fail.
Yeah.
It's a human that either hits that keyboard, presses a button, plugs something in, removes something, does something that usually causes. And I'm not saying that that's 100% true all the time, but most of the time, it's a human that has messed with that, triggered it, done something to it that causes some type of reaction, whether it's a positive or a negative reaction. I feel like I'm giving a physics class right now, and I've never taken physics, so
really,
okay. Look, man, my dad's a biochemist. Brother did like chemical engineering in college, and I did political science. You know why? Because you can BS on a paper all day long. So I was horrible. Math and sciences are not my strong point.
Yeah, I enjoyed physics. It's just a lot of it is a theory. When you start talking about the theoretical part, that's where I started getting lost. I'm a more hands-on guy. Labs and stuff like that I'm good with, but when you start kind of imagining what could happen, that's when I was like, But anyways, so we kind of talked.
Look for it, Will. You got the pasty look. You got the slick hair.
I do.
Now.
I need some glasses.
You need some glasses, a little pocket protector, and you're ready to go, bud.
So we kind of talked about why it's important, what it is, and why. Let's kind of talk about where are we at? The excuse me. Oh boy, what do they accomplish?
Okay, so. I think accomplishing a good physical security assessment. I've seen companies that charge a ton of money. And luckily for us, we kind of get the rebound. I guess we're like that breakup rebound. We come in and see it. And again, I'm not saying longer is better, but there's more detail. And the attention to detail is so very important. And let me just say, you're not going to catch everything every single time. And that's why I think it's good to do a physical security assessment, to reevaluate them, to recheck them. And that's on, people always ask, well, how often should I do that? How valuable how important is that asset to
Yep.
do? Do you have to do it every quarter? Probably not. But hey, if you're guarding like a nuclear site or something like that, I would say definitely once a year. Um, if it's your home, it's not that hard to go around your house and do a little security assessment on your home once a year. But I definitely say you should have a time frame. Anytime you change anything, you should do a security assessment with that. So what do they accomplish? It enables what I like to say the officials or the C-suite or the executive leadership. It allows them to see and pinpoint what those vulnerabilities are in their physical security posture. And then it assigns a level and prioritizes the risks and their assets. And so it gives them basically a visual. Again, we do a huge report, but then I really break it down into roughly an 8 to 10 point PowerPoint presentation for the executive team to see, because most of them don't have time to read that 60 to 100 plus page report. Their lawyers do, their chief security officers do. The executive team who's writing the check and making those executive decisions don't. They want what we call the bottom line up front. They want that bluff. So tell me what I need to do. Tell me how much it's going to cost, and tell me, kind of help us prioritize what we can and can't get done. And then from there, they work with, their chief information officer, CISO, CIO, CSO, and their tech team and their physical management team to accomplish these goals. So along with HR and legal. And so usually when I work with larger corporations, it's a team effort. It's the executive team. It's the human resources to make sure that we're not violating any of the HR policies that they have. We're working with legal, making sure we're not breaking any laws. We're in compliance with what they're doing. The technical side, making sure that they can handle what we're talking about. A lot of your hardware systems now, your badge readers, your cameras, intrusion detection systems are running off of either a Wi-Fi or a hardwire. And so what I'm recommending to my clients is fiber optic. If you have the ability and you're going to upgrade, let's look at fiber optic. If it's available in your area now, let's go ahead and start getting that in place, because in the next 5+ years, most of these systems most of them already have fiber optic capability, but most of them are going to be fiber optic capable, which means it's a little bit faster, stores a little bit better.
Yep.
So again, it helps you plan financial resources and pinpoint what needs to be done in a prioritized manner.
Okay. So kind of like you give them the shotgun splatter and then kind of narrow it down to the points that they need to probably spend the money on there most effectively.
Yeah. Again, one thing that we do is we constantly, we're talking to the whole team. It's not just one person. It's not the chief security officer. It's not the security guard. It's not the physical security manager. We're talking to the whole team. What is your goal? I always like to ask, what keeps you up at night? If any of my clients are listening, they're going to laugh, because I ask them that repeatedly, and I ask every single employee the same question, whether it's a senior executive manager or the janitor or anyone else, on the high, low end spectrum, what concerns do you have? Because as an executive, their concerns are going to be different than the mid-level manager, all the way down, and everyone's going to see things in a different light. And so that's why we conduct a ton of interviews with our clients and their employees.
Okay. So like who should get these? Because can anybody get them, or is it just kind of exclusive to large corporations or what?
So I would say like the physical security assessments that we do, they cost money, right? They're not cheap. They're not super expensive. I would say first, anyone that's going through some type of renovation, whether it's a physical building or they're upgrading their security systems, I've seen a lot of tech companies and installers, right? Whether it's an alarm company who does alarms, any of your security hardware, they want to sell. That, hey, you need this camera, you need this, you need that. Before you even begin going down that road, get a physical security assessment to really truly understand what is it that you truly do need. Yep. Are you going to spend $500,000 upgrading your system when that's not really necessary? maybe you just need some motion sensors and up your guard force. And so getting a security assessment you're going to spend money, but it can also help you save money.
Yeah.
And it's also going to pinpoint, again, going back to our last conversation of where those resources need to go. So in my opinion, everyone, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Look, if you're a homeowner, you have a family heirloom, and let's say you can't afford to save for, you're renting an apartment. Let's say you live in not the nicest part of town, and you're newly married, or you're living with your girlfriend, whatever it is, and you want anything you want to protect, you can do it, and you should do it. I know we've created like basic courses at Freedom Consulting on the website at fc-llc.org. You go to videos, and we have like Security 101, SEPTED, what is an assessment, those types of courses there for just to do the absolute basics. Now, if you're a company or a high net worth individual or a government entity, that's where we come in as Freedom Consulting, where we come in and we do those assessments for you. Yep. And so we work, again, with your team. So, all right, to answer your question, anyone or everyone,
okay,
should do a security assessment, in my opinion.
Sweet. All right. So your guy, Lath, is that how you pronounce his name? He just sent in a question, so I'm going to ask it for him. If a business was interested in developing in a certain area, can a security assessment be done to gather information about the area? If so, what information could a business get to help determine the right place?
Absolutely. And we've done this before in the past. I know we did it for, I want to say, a radio station out there in your area, out towards the beach in the Wilmington area, where they were moving locations. And so doing a crime assessment, again, I've talked about what our team does, and that is you look at crime. Again, what are you trying to protect? What equipment does a radio station have in there that they're trying to protect? Do they have intellectual property? Does that business, let's say you're a brewery, do you have, is your intellectual property stored there? If you're Coca-Cola, where do you keep the secret sauce? The secret recipe? What are you trying to protect? So yeah, we look at crime, we look at other threats in the area, we look at let's take Wilmington, North Carolina for an example. Hurricanes are a big deal, and flooding. You also get tornadoes out there. So we look at those types of threats. If you're up in the Pacific Northwest, hurricanes usually don't happen, but you have earthquakes. And so
volcanoes.
So we're looking at, earthquakes, volcanoes, how close, fault lines, and then what mitigating factors can you have, where are your generators? Are your generators in a basement that are going to get flooded? Are they up on the rooftop? What's your backup systems? Where are those located? Where's your power running through? So Lath, great question. Thanks for asking it. For sure. Anyone who's moving to a new site or thinking about building a site, definitely do a security assessment.
Okay. Cool. Sweet. All right. So let's move on to some pros and cons of having an external or a third party assessment, right? So what are some of the pros for why you should do that?
So we used to do this for the government when I was in, is we would go and red team or break into other facilities, or we would look at other teams. Yeah. Red team penetration. Yeah. And that's another type of an assessment, but it's a good idea to have a third party look in. Most CSOs, physical security people, they're slammed with just their day-to-day jobs, trying to get things up and running, trying to get things flowing and moving. And it's always good to have an outside vendor look at what you have, because if you look at my house and my family, I'm going to tell you all the great things about it. I'm pretty honest, and I'll tell you all the bad things too, about how crazy my boys are and what a nut job I am as a dad. But most people want to focus on the good. And a security assessment should do that. They should look at the good, but they should also understand what the assets, what you're trying to protect, and look from the outside in and inside out. And that's what a third party will do. you look at your guard force. I get this a lot. Well, we have a guard force, whether it's one of the top companies out there, your top 5 national or global companies, or a local one. And it's usually, I would say, it's a check the box. And that's what I hate.
Yeah.
I hate a check the box mentality. I hate that in the military. I hate it in the corporate society. So we look at your guard force. Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Most security guards, your average security guard, doesn't make a whole lot of money. They usually get 48 hours to 5 days worth of security guard training, and then they go on site and then they're shadowed for, again, another 48 hours, 5 days if you're lucky, with a manager or someone who's doing what they're doing, and then they're left to their own devices. Mm-hmm. And so I look at a guard force. Did the client write policies and procedures for them to follow? Do they follow them? Does the client ever check on them? Check to see, whether it's something small or something super egregious. Is it a huge error that they're totally blowing off and not doing? So, also, is your security hardware? Are your cameras up to date? Are your motion detectors? Do you have them? And sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind, or it's just good enough. And so that's where a third party comes in. And usually the latest and greatest, we say on the show quite a bit, ASIS, they are the standard. They're the international standard for security, physical security. So I always refer back, I don't know if you can see these, but, my books sit right here on my desk. So, the study guide, physical security principles, and stuff like that. So, again, are they up to date?
Yeah. So what are some of the cons then? I guess I guess you can kind of say there's some cons to it, right? There's going to be cons to everything. So what are some of the cons to it?
So I think one of the biggest cons, or
maybe the reservations people have for doing it is
about. I think that's reservation is cost.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't want you knowing their
secrets, their ins and outs, their
vulnerabilities. I would say, look, every family has their own dirt, right? Yeah. Every company has their own dirt. A lot of companies don't, even if a crime is committed, depending on the level and severity of the crime, it doesn't always get reported to law enforcement, right? They usually try to handle it internally. They don't want that spotlight on them. So a lot of companies just don't want the spotlight or people knowing their dirt that goes on there. Money, they're not cheap. They're not super expensive, but they're definitely not cheap.
But that goes back to you get what you pay for, right?
Yep. And then liability, right? This is a thing that we talk about quite a bit. Look, I challenge all of our listeners and viewers out there to just type in liability lawsuits. Do like a 7-Eleven, a Circle K, an AM, PM, whatever. One that sticks out in my mind that I use often is sexual harassment. Just because you don't know that there was a policy or should have been a policy doesn't mean you're not liable. Same thing happens with security. Ignorance doesn't pass in the courtroom. Doesn't pass in a lawsuit.
Ignorance isn't a defense, right? So yeah.
And so my thing is like, let's get ahead of that ignorance. Let's get ahead of that, and let's help create those policies and procedures. So there's that money. And then I would also say the misconception of technology or a guard force, and I think we've beat this one up quite a bit enough talking today. But it's good enough. I have security cameras. They're good enough. I have a guard force. They're good enough. Look, I've broken into facilities, and I'm a short, fat, one-legged man that's able to squeeze through fences, and I don't know how I do that because my gut's like on one side of the fence and my butt's like stuck in between the other one. Luckily, I always bring a little bit of Vaseline or some Crisco to slide in between stuff. That's a great image for you.
Yeah.
But
I hope you have like a Catwoman skin tight black suit on when you do it.
Well, now it's just getting gross, bud. Like you took it too far. I took it to a level. But so if I can break into a facility without trying too much, and it's a highly secure facility, what do you think a bad actor who, and most threats like this, if you're an ultra high net worth individual or some type of corporation, the threat's either coming from inside, and that's one thing we focus on a lot is that insider threat, or a bad actor who's studying you, who studies your guard force, who knows when those lights come on, know where those security cameras are pointed, knows, they've probably done a few probes too, gone up to the guard shack and, hey, are they watching security cameras? They may have driven by it, a certain entry point to see, do they get a reaction or not? And so, that misconception of technology, or that we're good enough.
Yeah. People definitely rely on technology a little too much, I think, when it comes to that type of stuff. Yeah. So I know you didn't really cover it, but I know we've talked about it before. Can you talk about a little bit how important it is to get the CSO and the CISO on the same page and working together?
So I think it's huge. And I can tell you a lot of your phenomenal companies, your Exxons and your Shell and some of your oil and chemical companies who have these huge threats that are global. You see this partnership. Yes, cybersecurity and physical security are two different, but there's this bleed over. There's this inner circle that connects the two. And I always recommend that they share an office, or the same space. That there's meetings that are constantly happening because of that convergence that I mentioned earlier. There's a misconception of they do what they do and I do what I do on the tech side. But again, your security hardware, your cameras, your sensors, access readers, all that is it's a physical security. If your turnstiles, right? Your turnstiles are a physical thing. So is that badge reader, but there's also a technical side to that. And so, what are those policies or procedures? What happens if you lose your badge or you misplace it for a day? What are those policies and procedures? Do you go to the guard check and they issue a temporary new one without shutting off your old one? How many badges can you have? Look, I had multiple DoD ID cards because I always left mine in the computer. And so whenever I go on deployment, I'd go get an extra one made and just kept it in my car, and I had the other one, for the computer. Again, breach of security, right? Not what is supposed to be done. But I'm not the only person doing that. In corporate America, you have, people who are just busy in day-to-day stuff that either leave it in their desk or leave it at home, take their wife's car or their spouse's car to work. They accidentally leave it there, whatever the reason is. But looking at those policies and procedures together with your technical cyber guy and your physical security guy to make sure that they're in alignment, that they're in agreement. And also you want to look at operations, right? If you're in a manufacturing facility, do you want that pendulum to swing? I'm not talking about politics here, but if we look at our country, we had 4 years of hard to the right. Now we have 4 years kind of more on the hard left. And where's that swing? And when I look at doing a security assessment, I want to take it I want to bring it in the middle, and let's work more towards a more secure way. But how do we get that pendulum to swing in the middle without affecting operations? Because at the end of the day, they can't pay for these upgrades if we slow down their operations and put a huge dent because we're so focused on security and we're not looking at the client in general. And I think that's when you're looking at a third party to come in and do a security assessment, what's that relationship like? Do they understand the client and the client's needs?
I think that's always like the, balancing security with convenience, the security with operations and stuff like that. It's always that balancing act. You have to kind of how comfortable you are to risks to the threats and risks compared to how secure you want to be. So,
and let me come back to that really, really quick. Cause I just had this experience with my client and it was a great experience. I had their operations manager literally poking holes in some of my suggestions as we're kind of getting ready to wrap things up. And he was asking, and having him sit down and talk to me about how my suggestions are going to impact them on an operations side was huge. And so that had a great conversation. It's not to say that I'm not going to change my security recommendations. However, it's going to affect how I rank those recommendations
Mhm.
or how we implement those. I shouldn't even say rank, how we implement those recommendations with a more operational focus.
Yeah.
So we don't hinder the client in a way.
Yeah. Makes sense. So I know
Damn
you're
right it
dealing.
does, Will.
Oh Lord, you're not going to be able to fit your head in the screen here pretty soon. All right. So I I don't know if this is a thing. I've heard of it, but obviously you've done these a lot longer and a lot more than I have. How can you avoid the perception of coming in there and kind of stepping on the CSO's toes? You know, like kind of. I don't know. I know in law enforcement, a lot of times people get territorial. Like this is my jurisdiction. I'm going to do it my way, and they don't. They kind of they lose track of the trees through the forest, right? And so, how can you go in there without perhaps giving that perception that you're in there to do their job better than them?
So I think first and foremost is, like you said, in law enforcement, the military was the same way. Look, on my team, it was like, don't come in here and tell me how to do my job. I'll kind of put a negative spotlight on myself, but at one point in time, I had a team sergeant who I always felt was like in my stuff. I was the weapons guy on the team. And we hardly ever took vehicles out. We were in a crappy area of Afghanistan, and I couldn't get my 50 cal up and working. It would like fire 1 or 2 shots, and I checked my headspace and timing constantly. My team sergeant at the time, he was a former weapons guy, and he came over the radio. He was like, "Hey, Jake, did you load the ammo properly?" And I'm like, "You MFer, of course I did, right? Like, who do you think I am? I'm not some cherry brand new dude right out of the course, right?" And this was my 3rd deployment. And I kind of looked down at my ammo. I'm like, oh crap, it's pointed up, right? Chain was pointing. I'm like, oh, had to reload the ammo, and that was it, right? So my ego, and I kind of have this mentioned in my notes, is ego. So I always kind of use that story and reflect back on that story of my team sergeant was always in my stuff, and I had a huge ego. I didn't like him in my stuff, but he was absolutely right. So as a security consultant, what I like to do is put myself in that CSO's position, the security guard manager's position, the physical security guy's position, even the CEO's position in the executive team, right? I always like to look at it as if this were my company, what would I want? If this was my money, how would I want it spent? If I was a CSO and I had a third party coming in, how do I want that relationship to be? Am I going to push them off like I did my team sergeant? Or am I going to welcome them in? And I think that depends on the security consultant coming in. So I always try to build a relationship. I am there, A, to do a job, and then B, to build that relationship and to kind of get in their corner. Yeah. I can tell you from almost all of my experiences dealing with corporate America and high net worth individuals with their security team is, what can I do to make your life a little easier? What is it that you've been asking for that you think is critical that you need? And I'm not sitting here saying, look, they've been asking for a machine gun nest with a lot of AT4s and some Carl Gustav rounds, and I think it's critical. As long as there's a need for it, I'm 100% in there backing them up for it and kind of fighting for them, because it's a second opinion. It's an outside vendor, an outside professional person's opinion on what they need. So I really try to build that relationship with them, look at what they need and how can I get them from a point, a mid-tier. How can I make a bad situation better or a good situation even higher?
Yeah.
And so that is always my goal when I'm dealing with senior leadership, especially on the security side.
Yeah.
I don't want them feeling threatened. I'm not there to take their job. I'm not there to cast them in a bad light. Now, look, if they're doing a bad job, we're going to have a talk. If I see something, and I always go to them first. The Slash client I had, there's a few issues, and before it was brought up to senior leadership, we went and we had a conversation about it, and he gave his reasons. Look, I've been asking for X, Y, and Z. I knew this was going to happen. I'm glad it was you, not a nefarious person coming in here doing it and really doing it, in a bad way. But I've been asking, and look at all my emails. Here's everything. It's like, well, great. Now we're going to highlight that and show the importance of it. So again, it's building a relationship.
Yeah. I think it's important to go in there with the mindset and you let them know that you're there to help them make the company better and make this easier, your life easier. You're not there to hinder them. You're not there to make them look bad. Like you said, you're there to help them get the job done.
Yeah. And I think the competent CSOs, the competent security managers, those who are doing a really good job, they don't have a whole lot to be afraid of, because if they're doing their job properly, this is everything that I'm pointing out, most of it they've already noticed. And so it's usually a second set of eyes, an outside vendor coming in and putting that spotlight on it for them and helping them. I look at myself as a tool for them.
You're definitely a tool, Jake.
I knew you were going there, Will.
Yeah, I mean, I got to take the low hanging fruit sometimes. All right. So before we wrap up, I want to ask one last thing, one kind of question topic. Why should you choose a company, say like Freedom, since, Freedom Consulting, that specializes in physical security assessments? Why choose them?
So I think first and foremost, you want someone with experience, right? I'd say at Freedom, we have decades worth of experience between all of us working here, and not just in the same experience, not just the military. We have law enforcement, we have private sector individuals, we have individuals that really cover that whole spectrum. And it's purposely done that way because, Will, you spent most of your career in law enforcement. Yes, you had a few years in the military, but you got, I would say, most of your security expertise through time in law enforcement. And so you have a different point of view than I do, who spent quite a bit of time in the military. And, I don't like to usually share my military experiences with clients because, again, it goes back to the, 20-foot tall fences, fighting positions,
machine wire.
Yeah. And honestly, majority of my time, yeah, sure, when we were in a combat zone, that was there. But we also help create some of the latest and greatest technology that's used in corporate America now on the civilian side. But then we also walked around, what we call like a plain clothes. It lived in either homes and cities or apartments, hotels. And so when I say military, I don't want people thinking of the high end war zone type stuff. So we have a lot of great experience. I think that's first and foremost. We just kind of mentioned the attention to detail and the relationship building. I think that's huge. For us at Freedom, we don't want that one and done job. Sure, we'll take it, but that's not what we're looking for. We want relationships. Most of our clients we've had for years, and there's a reason why. Look, when my phone rings at midnight or 1 a.m. because something's going on the opposite side of the globe, I'm not charging my client for that. I'm not. We aren't the nickel and dime, what I call like the lawyer fees, right?
Yeah.
We basically look at it as a family. Hey, they need something. Now, if it's going to take,